Hi, I'm Anthony, and this is of course another Amazingly Average game review. This time I'm actually going to be talking about Saints Row 4 by Volition and previously THQ, but it got transferred over to Deep Silver. And it's the fourth game in the series, obviously. And it was really hard to figure out what was going to happen with it because the fact that THQ was going out of business, it was transferred over to a new developer, although the majority of the team from THQ moved over to Deep Silver as far as Volition is concerned as well, to kind of create this game. It is an open world style game, similar to the previous ones, and I mean there's a lot of mixed feelings about the series. It started off as kind of a more serious gangster game. A lot of people even went as far as calling it a Grand Theft Auto ripoff, with the whole sandbox, mission-based gangster theme to it. And it kind of evolved from there to added a little bit more of the over-top craziness that you see, which 3 is full-blown, just over-the-top insanity. And so a lot of people were wondering what 4 was going to be like. Well, as far as the story is concerned of Saints Row 4, you've transcended the whole celebrity and even went as far as trying to be an actual hero instead of just being revered as one. So you go as far as being a government operative. At the very beginning of the game, you actually take on a rogue, a terrorist group that's actually led by an old friend, or I should say foe, but I'm not going to mention who. You're going to have to see that for yourself. And you see already, right off the bat, not only just so many different references to different forms of pop culture, other games, and so on, but also just the level of, over-the-top insanity that you see from, Saints Row the Third, kind of also brought into this one. The controls aren't much different than Saints Row the Third. The only thing that really has changed, instead of having the different kinds of grenades, the way it works now is Q, or for the different consoles, that's different buttons. Instead of throwing a grenade, what you do now is that's how you activate whatever superpower that you have, which can also be cycled either through the D-pad on the consoles or through F1, F2, F3, F4 on the PC. To which you have Blast, which has also different elements attached to each power. You have Telekinesis, also with different elements. Stomp, with, again, different elements. And you have Buff. Did I mention this also has different elements? Then you have your passive abilities, which are just active at all times, which is your super speed, which you kind of saw a hint of that during the trouble with the clones if you played that expansion for Saints Row 3rd. Which is going to be shift the same way you would normally run, except for in the simulation that's how you do super speed runs. You no longer just run normally. Spacebar on PC is how you jump, but it's a super jump. If you hold down, you can actually jump higher the longer you hold down spacebar in the simulation. And the other passive is kind of like a force wave. It kind of bounces things away. And then you have Death from Above, to where if you jump high enough, what you can go ahead and do is right click to kind of pause yourself in midair, kind of just aim where you want to, then left click to just come slamming down and crashing into your enemies. Other than that, again, in terms of controls, not much different, still very easy to pick up, play, and have fun with. And I mean, a lot of people were upset about the transition into that insanity and just the ridiculousness of it, but it kind of makes sense because for starters, they had to break away from, just being compared to so many other different games as far as the open sandbox world. They had to establish their own identity, which they definitely did with 3 and completely nailed it with 4. And as far as a lot of people who were really upset about it going from its completely gangster roots to what it is now, from them being practically pop stars, and in this game being the President of the United States of America, it kind of makes sense. The Saints were always about, or at least the boss was always about more power, more respect, more money. He's a sociopath. That's kind of what the male or female boss was all about. And there's only so much you can do as a gangster. You're not going to really be able to have that much power. You might think you have a whole lot of power, but there's always going to be people that are going to be above you. And what greater source of power or money than the President of the United States of America? And that's where the story basically takes place. You finish off that mission and immediately you're thrusted shortly into the future to where you are the president. And you run into some old friends. They're all talking to you. You right off the bat have a few funny decisions that you have to make that are just one or the other. Well, again, something to let you go ahead and see for yourself. But almost immediately afterwards, it's just the whole talk of an alien invasion. And no sooner than that happens, in the middle of Kenzie giving an address to the press, Zinyak, the leader of the Zin Empire, the alien force that invades the U.S., kind of just crashes through and starts abducting all of your homies. And on top of that, you get into this really crazy gunfight where you're shooting down all the different alien spaceships that are kind of just blowing up everything around you, causing absolute carnage and devastation. And you make a valiant attempt, but unfortunately Zinyak has powers like telekinesis, just overall stature, more brute strength than you have. And the character of Zinyak is just written so well as well. It's just such a proper gentleman, speaks proper English, just has a love for old literature, and just just really well done. And he mocks you for your bravado, slams you around, and talks about enjoying breaking you. And that's kind of where you get thrown into the simulation. A lot of people were really worried as far as the story when it came to it originally being a DLC, because there was Enter the Dominatrix, which was slated for quite a few months back. It was going to be for the final expansion for Saints Row 3rd, which was Zinyak invading, but you weren't the president, you didn't have as many superpowers. It's probably going to be similar to The Trouble with Clones, which where you got the idea for the super running speed and the kind of Hadoukens, the idea of the superpowers. They kind of just took a few different ideas here or there and ran with it, and it greatly expanded upon it in the story of Saints Row 4. And after you're thrown into the simulation, the way it works is you and all of your friends, you find out through progressing through the story, are trapped in your own personal versions of hell. And for the boss, for instance, it's the 1950s where nobody swears, everybody's exactly the same, it's just so dull and boring. So, with the help of Kenzie, you break out from there, meet up with Keith David, get a spaceship, fly off to the famous song from Night of the Roxbury's. I don't remember the name of the song, fortunately. That's what most people tend to know it for. And it's just, again, it's just some of the ridiculous jokes and references and little nuances throughout the entire game that just never really get old. It's very well done. They kind of traded the crude toilet humor, which was bad in Saints Row 3rd, for just a lot wittier writing in this one. And they kind of also take different elements from different games. For instance, the way the story progresses with Saints Row 4 feels a lot like Mass Effect 2. But again, it does so to where it doesn't feel like it's a cheap knockoff. Again, it kind of finds its own identity, kind of establishes a story of its own. Because the whole idea is just trying to not only kill Zinyak and break down the simulation, but also to get your homies back, because, trying to get the band back together. So, I'm not going to go too much into each of the different stories. You'd have to see for yourself. But again, it's very well handled. It's a lot of fun. The superpowers were also something a lot of people were worried about, but that's also done quite well. As far as the whole vehicle system, when you have the super sprint, you can super sprint all day, and I can see where obviously you're much faster, especially once you get the fully upgraded super sprint and have unlimited super sprint, that you really wouldn't need to get into the vehicles. But, I mean, you still have that option. It really comes down to the player's choice. And it's not so much that the cars are useless, because they're not. I mean, I still drive in it from time to time, or even just in some of the missions you're forced to drive in it. It's sometimes, refreshing to do so. Not to mention there's a lot deeper level of customization to vehicles than in any of the previous games. So that's also a nice little touch. But I guess really what it is, it's not so much that it's made driving useless. The super speed is just so much fun. It's kind of hard to want to drive again, because you're just jumping all over the place, running up walls, zooming, gliding, not really flying, and just so on. It's hard not to want to use the superpowers when they're at your disposal. You also have your moments that are quite serious. There's one major one that I didn't even see coming, and there's also some of the just hilarity that was also throughout most of the series as well. And then, unfortunately, there's some serious scenes that are kind of made fun of. But, again, it's all about the execution, and they tend to nail it. The soundtrack. I didn't get to listen to the soundtrack much during my actual playthrough for obvious reasons. But later on, listening to some of the songs they have, as far as the alternative, the metal, the rock, the classic, the music choice in this is just phenomenal. Especially during certain story missions or just fights. It's either just so random you can't help but laugh, which kind of screws you up, or you just appreciate again just the subtlety, just how they kind of just throw that in there. You're like, just good job. And again, to the references, there's so many references, but thankfully it doesn't feel like it's overdone or it doesn't feel forced. It never really gets annoying like you would think when it comes to somebody just doing references left and right. I mean, right off from the beginning, you have a Predator reference. They kind of poke fun of Call of Duty as well as Battlefield. From there, there's even an Armageddon reference. And I mean, that's only in the first mission. And there's also a few that I've even forgotten about. Ghostbusters. Huge Ghostbusters reference was absolutely hilarious, involving Pierce, but I won't go any further than that. You also have probably my favorite. It was also my favorite just section to play in is when you actually go to save Johnny Gat, which isn't really a spoiler because if you've seen the trailers, that was actually one of their selling points. Johnny Gat is back. And the explanation of how he makes it is just phenomenal. It's just again, just you have to see it for yourself. I'm not going to spoil anything for you, but you were stuck in a Streets of Rage, Double Dragon kind of mashup to where you're playing this 2D side-scrolling beat-em-up. And they did such a great job with it that even your character, the way you customize your character, is somehow put into that game in that style. It's not like you're just somebody else. And you're going around, and that section in itself is just a whole hell of a lot of fun. And like I said, it's great to play. Even more fun when you play cooperatively. As far as the only downside I would really say to Saints Row 4, at least when I played, the version I played is the PC version, there was quite a few glitches which are kind of to be expected but can still be quite annoying. And yes, obviously some of the glitches are done on purpose, but then there's quite a few different glitches where they're actual glitches and not glitches in the simulation. There was probably only one or two times the game froze, and they were probably the worst possible times to freeze, because then it kind of just thrown right to the beginning of the mission. It's mildly frustrating, but again, not a serious thing. As far as the length of the story, it felt shorter than Saints Row the Third, which everybody said was the shortest to begin with. But this is actually going to go into the pros as well. One of the things I really liked is, despite the fact that it felt shorter, everything felt much more meaningful. The story missions definitely had more weight to it. There was just a lot more content that was available. As far as the actual diversions, I had a lot more fun with the diversions in this one than I had in the previous ones. As I mentioned before, I really dislike Heli Assault and some of the other diversions that were in Saints Row the Third. And this one, a lot of them kind of help hone in your skill on some of your superpowers, but they're also just again, a lot of fun to go ahead and mess around with and have fun with. And not only that, but the way they handle the characters. There's not only the fact that you save your homies, for the final fight, but you also can do loyalty missions, again, similar to Mass Effect 2. And the way that works is it gives you a deeper understanding of your teammates, either during the actual story mission where you go to save them from their own personal hell, or even sometimes the loyalty mission, or just a little bit of both. Each character you learn a little bit more about, and they themselves kind of grow as a person, which is really well done. It's kind of surprising for a game that's usually meant to be really silly to have them something so serious, and I greatly appreciate something like that. And just the customization overall was great. Like I said before, you have car customization that's deeper than it was in the previous games. The character customization, you have a couple more sliders than you did previously as far as the actual facial and body types and everything else. Nothing too expansive. The clothing, they gave you more options than the third. They took away a few, but still overall more options than Saints Row the third. But not the whole layering system like a lot of people wanted that was in Saints Row 2, unfortunately. But also the weapons. Oh my god, I love the fact that they add customization to the actual weapons. And the beauty of it is too, is you don't have to buy each one of the skins. So that's a nice little touch. You go ahead and just choose what you want and go with it. For instance, I myself, being a huge brown coat Firefly Serenity fan, the fact that they actually had a Frontier Model B as a weapon skin, just, I geeked out completely. Or even with the rocket launcher, you had the weapon skin that made it the guitar case, almost straight out of Once Upon a Time in Mexico, the whole Desperado thing. Or even the burst rifle was called the Impulse rifle, which is a reference to the pulse rifle that's used in Aliens. So once again, not only further references, which are just great, but also just a higher level of customization, something to make it very personal. Even with the voices, you had the classic voices of 3 voices for male, 3 voices for female, and then instead of a zombie, you have Nolan North, who has his own voice, which adds quite a few different dialogue, options and things that kind of pop up that he says than the original 6. So it might be worth doing a playthrough with the Nolan North voice just to see how that turns out. Overall, I was scared at first, because again, once you get to the 3rd, 4th, 5th, however many, once you get further into a series like this, it gets really hard to try and balance things out to keep it just fresh and still fun and enjoyable and get people to keep playing and enjoying it. But they really just were firing on all cylinders. They kind of just nailed everything, I wouldn't say to perfection, but damn near close to it. And if this is their last game, which they kind of said that this more likely would be if they were to do further Saints Rows, it would either be a reboot or just something new, not involving this universe of the Saints, something different. I would definitely say this is one hell of a way to send it off. I know usually I'm like, hey, if you're a fan of this, buy it. If you're not a fan of this, rent it or something similar. Just flat out, the answer is buy it. I would say buy it, absolutely. It's well worth the money. The witty writing, the level of customization, the cameos, the references, the amount of fun, the story, all of it. Soundtracks is great. It's well worth anybody's time. Everybody should definitely get this either for PC, PS3, Xbox 360, what have you. It will definitely be worth the kind of money you're putting in there, and you will not regret it, even all the way up until the end. It is just so much fun. And that'll do it for this amazingly average game review of Saints Row 4. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think. Hopefully it helps you out, and until next time.